name's Jen Looper. I'm a developer advocate at Progress for the next 2 days, and on Monday I'm joining Microsoft, so I'm pretty excited about this. I'm also the founder and CEO of View Vixens. Maybe some of folks have heard about View Vixens. I've got an honorary vixen right there. I'm waiting for you in my Slack room. So if you're a person who identifies as a woman and you want to learn Vue.js, you can come to us, and we have free workshops modeled after the Women Who Code, Girls Who Code, NG Girls, these kind of initiatives. It's a lot of fun. We have a blast. And I would invite you to come and check us out at viewvixens.org. Okay, so let's get started. We had our little caveat about the weird videos and the weird images I'm going to show. Doors over there, if you're not comfortable. We have a code of conduct, but some of these videos actually are right on that thin edge. There's some naughty language and some interesting things said. So just to give you that idea of what's going on here. So I want to talk a little bit about what is ethics. This is the second talk I've given on a philosophical subject in the past 2 conferences, so I think either I'm on a roll like Cottonelle or something else is happening to my career and I'm doing another switch. But I like to look at ethics by taking a look at a website like this. This is on the internet. It's just a discussion of different sorts of philosophical standpoints and philosophical schools. So the field of ethics, also called moral philosophy, it involves systematizing, defending, and recommending concepts of what is right and what is wrong behavior. So this is kind of a good overall framework with which I want to talk about how we can use this definition of what ethics is for our own research and for our own use of images as both consumers and producers. What's the agenda for today? The agenda for today is to take a look at the basics of ethical philosophy or moral philosophy. I also want to talk about ethics and both the creation and the consumption of images. So we're going to take a romp through the use of imagery in video, in standard still images, in GIFs, in memes, and how machine learning is going to be impacting this whole field as we go forward. So that's point 3. I want to talk about AI and how we can maybe use some of our ethics to help stem the flow of things that are coming in the future with regards to how we use and produce images. So remember in that first slide, I talked about how we're talking about moral philosophy, and there are basically 3 parts to it. The first part that we can take a look at is metaethics. So this is a subfield of moral philosophy. Metaethics is kind of like the Socratian type of asking questions, asking disciplined questions, discovering through questioning how we understand what is right and what is wrong. So it's asking abstract questions about value-bearing things. For example, is murder ever permissible? Keep that in mind, And I'm not giving you answers right now. These are just questions that you can ask as you go along. That's the field of metaethics. Diving a little bit deeper and looking at this a little bit on a different level, you can take a look at normative ethics. So normative ethics helps you determine standards. Once you start asking questions, you can start taking a look at normative ethics to determine standards of the rightness or the wrongness of actions. For example, since we're speaking about murder, if I'm attacked with deadly force, I posit that deadly retaliation is permissible. Awesome, okay, now that we're completely triggered. Normative ethics. And the third field that I'd like to kind of leverage today is another subset of moral philosophy, and that's applied ethics. So applied ethics, just as you would think, is taking ethics and applying them to very specific circumstances. So this is helping you determine practical applications of moral considerations. So we've decided that sometimes murder is permissible, sometimes manslaughter could be permissible, and in a case of murder, how can we deal with the types of murder that we're dealing with? So we have first degree, and the consequence for first-degree murder is X, second degree is Y, third degree manslaughter, all this sort of thing. So applied ethics is really taking your systems and applying them and deciding what the rules are around these things that we're looking at. All right. So in this talk, I'm going to take a look at using metaethics to talk about the ethics of creating imagery. So we're talking about the photographer's toolbox using metaethics. And then I want to use normative ethics to talk about consuming and sharing images. And then we're going to take ethics and apply them when we're dealing with imagery that's created by an AI. This is where it gets weird and kind of interesting and exciting. So we'll see how you feel about this sort of thing as we go along. So like I said, when Tamira contacted me about speaking here, I really didn't know how to start, how to frame this discussion. It's a big topic, the ethics of imagery, right? Well, fortunately, the Thomson Foundation, which is based in London, has a really good course. So I just took a course. I just took a class to get ready for this talk. And it's on the Thomson Foundation's website. It's called the Photographer's Ethical Toolkit, and it's a self-paced course. You can just take it. And you go through it, and you're given some ideas as you go along. And one of the ideas is talking about the meta-ethics of a producer of imagery as a photographer. Images, they posit, must be produced and consumed, but primarily produced with empathy, autonomy, and integrity. Okay, given that that is a thing that we want to do while we're dealing with producing images, let's take a look at how we can take these ideas and use our meta-ethical questions about images as we encounter them, and as we create them, actually. Remember how we've been bashing stock photos this whole time? Stock photos are actually the most ethical of images, right? Because all these people are actors. These images have been taken with consent, right? So the idea of using empathy to create images is this concept that you must understand your boundaries, understand what your relationship is to your subject, and require consent. You know, these folks are paid, and they look very happy. So the poor guy is like nibbling the lady's ear, but it's charming. But she seems like she's happy. Lovely stock photo, total consent, no problems here. This is an ethical and empathetic image. Unfortunately, no one's going to use this. That's beside the point. So how about this? This is a better example. If an image must be produced while respecting your subject's autonomy and self-governance, what about an image like this? This is a nice one. Have you discovered Humans of New York, H-O-N-Y, Honey? I'm sure you know of this guy, Brandon Stanton. He does wonderful TED Talks that you can take a look at. And this is a picture that he took of a gentleman in New York. And he has a whole process that he talks about on YouTube about how he approaches a potential subject and asks questions, or the meta-ethics, asking questions. Is it okay to approach you? Is it okay to talk to you? Can I get a quote? Can I take your picture? So it's a whole systematic step. So this gentleman is relaxed in his neighborhood, and the context is that he left Belize when I was 12 or 13, just as all my friends were getting swept up into gangs. And after I came to America, they were all killed. So it's quite the storyline behind this very empathetic image. It respects his autonomy because it's uncovered his past. And it's a very great use of taking that ethical image according to the system that has been created by Humans of New York. So take a look at all of that. Anything that this guy writes on YouTube is worth taking a look at. Here's an image that's right on the edge, right? So ideally, you want your images to be integral. So they're supposed to be respecting context. You're not supposed to be misrepresenting your subject. This is kind of interesting because I'm going to assume that everyone's permission was granted to take this image. Let's just hope. But it does respect context. This is an image that's telling a story, and it's talking about how the bourgeoisie is basically kind of a little bit oblivious and ambivalent to the homeless man behind them, who is equally oblivious to their existence. So it's an image that tells a story, and it is an image that respects context because context is important to the story. So I think this is a kind of a borderline image, but I think it is integral, it respects context, and it certainly doesn't misrepresent what's going on. Now, before we get into this idea that, all you have to do is take your toolbox and slap in your rules and you'll have an ethical image every time, just note that ethics are subjective. They're fluid, so according to the genre and the audience of an image. So, for example, if you're using an image for an art show, you might feel free to go ahead and Photoshop the heck out of it and make something really interesting and artistic because no one's expecting documentary-style images to be in an art show unless it's a photographical art show. So you have to really look at the context of how the image is going to be used and tailor your ethical considerations towards the context. So that's a little thing just to note as we go along. All right, so we've taken the toolbox that was given to us by the Thomson Foundation. Thank you, Thomson Foundation. We've asked some questions as we're looking at pictures that are being produced. Now let's move along to normative ethics, and let's take a look at some test cases that allow us to set standards. So we're going to take a look at some seriously unorthodox, unethical images and see how we can use our ethics to set standards on how these situations should be handled as we go along. Okay. So the normative ethics of image creations. You can use these classic examples, some of these you probably already have seen and know of unethical image creation, like this one. This is a pretty well-known cover of The Economist magazine, and it shows President Obama sort of devastated by the BP oil spill, the damage beyond the spill. It's very dramatic. It's gray. The light's a little altered here. He's looking down, and he's just very upset. Well, the original is actually this larger picture, and there's a whole lot of context that's been cropped out, right? So they cropped it right above the tape line, so he's not actually in the spill. They cropped out the lady to whom he's clearly bending over just to say something to, so it's not, a picture of his complete devastation at looking at the oil spill. And so this is a great example of how you really should not be cropping images because it does tend to violate the integrity of the image and takes it straight out of context, changes its meaning. So that's not something we want to be doing. Okay? How about photoshopping? So I went to my community. Do you know this image? This was pretty famous a couple of years ago. I went to my community and said, give me a photoshopped image. And this is the one that they came up with, a famous photoshopped image. So it has President Bush holding this book upside down and making him look very foolish, right? And I actually had no idea that this was photoshopped. I always took this image as the gospel truth because I had no clue. And we bring our own desires into these images. You have a feeling that this person is not the sharpest knife in the drawer, so you think that this is a perfectly acceptable reflection of reality. It's not. Obviously, it's not. He's reading a book. He's looking at the little girl respectfully as she reads, and she's quite proud to read. So this is a photoshopped kind of joke. But as such, it's completely unethical. It violates the subject's autonomy, and it violates the intent of the image. Here's a famous addition, another great example of a really lousy thing to do to an image. Famous picture of O.J. Simpson after he was arrested. You can see he's got his number from the Los Angeles County Jail, I guess. And it was the Time magazine decided to take that image and darken it considerably, making it way more sinister looking. And it's a terrible thing to do, and it caused a scandal because it violates, the empathy that we're supposed to be using towards our subject as we create images. And it plays on this nasty racial pandering that's going on here. Very unfortunate. And also, it's particularly damaging because I believe this came out before the trial was completed, if I'm correct, and it could easily, influence a jury. So this kind of stuff, it's not only nasty and unfortunate, but it can really screw up the justice system. So things like this, not okay. Here's a famous Pulitzer Prize-winning image of the students who were killed at the Kent State, it was a riot or a protest against the Vietnam War. I had no idea, but this actually was photoshopped, even before Photoshop was invented. And can you see the difference? There's a pole that looks like it's sticking out of the girl's head. It's just a fence, and they just erased that to make the image look better. This is, a minor subtraction, but it does violate context. And yes, the image looks better, but the edits, are inappropriate for a documentary image, like we mentioned earlier. So it's kind of interesting. How far can you push the idea of cleaning up an image to prove a point? Kind of interesting. There's also a consideration of acceptability. You probably know the image of Napalm Girl. She's the little girl, she's 9 years old, and she's running, screaming from a napalm attack on her village in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. She's had all of her clothes burned off of her body, and she's screaming in pain, and it's quite a difficult picture to look at. It was actually removed from Facebook because it was deemed unacceptable because it's full frontal nudity of a minor. But this is another Pulitzer Prize-winning image that changed not only the life of the photographer, but also the course of the war, because the American public, due to this image, in part, were brought to the realization that this is a terrible war, that there are terrible things happening to civilians. In this situation, Does the end justify the means? And I'm just going to open this to you. Does the end justify the means? Does violating the subject's autonomy and publishing such a picture make it okay, especially considering that the photographer was a local who was on the receiving end of that war? It's a very interesting borderline picture. I don't think I agree with Facebook's decision to take it off. It's a historical photo. I don't know. This is one of those things that you'll bring your own sensibilities to. And it's a very interesting test case to use our toolbox of normative ethics. OK, so quiz time. So now that we've learned about some things that you can do when you're dealing with taking images, taking pictures, let's take a look at an image here. OK, test case. So you've been hired to take photographs of a beach to promote tourism, but the beach is littered with plastic waste, with bottles. This is a big problem nowadays, of course. So what do you do? OK, so show of hands. I'll just read them out, and then I'll ask for A, B, and C. So do you take well-framed pictures that represent the beach accurately and do basic editing to make the scene more vivid but leave the rubbish? Or clean up a small area and photograph that at an angle so that no litter is visible in the frame? Remember, you're doing this for the tourist authority, OK? Or just digitally edit away the rubbish so the whole place looks more inviting. So what do we think, given what we know? How about raise of hands for A? Interesting. B? C? OK, we've come that far. That's good. So the proper thing in this situation to do is actually A, you are dealing with taking a picture for the tourist authority, but you want to represent this image as it is in reality. It's right on the edge of being a documentary image. It's marketing, but you need to show the reality. So you probably would want to take the picture. You can edit it a little bit, but you might want to leave some of the bottles. Actually, the really proper thing to do is to get all your friends together and clean the entire beach up, and then take the picture and hope it doesn't recur, and visit it to make sure it doesn't recur. But anyway, that's beyond the point. OK, let's try another one. So you're on a small boat on a river on a vacation, and you're impressed by the paddling technique of the person hired to steer your boat, and you want to take photographs of her. So what do? Ask her if you can take photographs. Take a couple of photographs without asking, and then show her the images you took. Ask her if you can take more, and offer to send her a few if she likes them. Or you take photographs without asking. This boat tour is a tourist attraction, so surely it's appropriate to photograph her. The photographer here in the front row is like, Oh, by the way, you have my consent. OK, so good. OK, so A. OK, how about B? And C? OK, so C is obviously wrong. A is great. B is also acceptable because it does involve consent, even if it's after the fact. So the idea is at least get some kind of buy-in from your subject. So it's kind of fun. OK, so let's talk a little bit about, we've talked a little bit about producing images as a photographer. Let's talk about image consumption. We, as web developers, as mobile developers, we're constantly looking for nice imagery on the net and using these things ethically. Well, I want to show you my very favorite meme. I think this is hysterical. My daughter and I send this to each other, and we just cry laughing, because when you're dead, you realize you ain't got to go to work no more because you did. So I love this. But I also love really stupid jokes. So unfortunately, memes are really tough to justify ethically, probably because of some folks like this. Now, I don't know about the mummy. I don't think we got her consent, and even unwrapping a mummy and taking photographs is probably not very ethical. But this poor guy, Star Wars kid, and this has been enhanced. It didn't even look this awesome when he started it. It's a ridiculous image of the guy spinning around. And he was relentlessly bullied for this meme. He had a really tough time of this sort of thing. So memes are really tough. And I would love it if people would think a little bit before using memes of people. Images are taken, I don't want to be a killjoy. I think they're hysterical most of the time, but they are oftentimes taken out of context just so that we can laugh at them. They're altered, they're cropped, they're taken without consent, they're recaptioned, they're posted without consent, they're constantly, recontextualized. I'm actually trying nowadays to just stick to cute animals. And I hope if I make it to heaven that I'm not going to be stopped at the gates saying that you're not supposed to dress up animals and you can go straight to hell. But you probably remember Dog Fort and then the famous Labrador, I have no idea, and then hello, this is dog. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and stick to the animal memes just because they're hilarious and I hope they're not offending the animals. So something to think about as you go and create presentations. So at this point in the talk, I would love to have you all buckle up and let's talk about what's coming going forward. So finally, I mentioned that I want to talk a little bit about machine learning and how it's dealing with imagery. And what it's doing is it's enabling the consumption and the production of images in completely new ways. And this is really important for all of us to kind of get our arms around because this is a burgeoning kind of new field that is kind of like the Wild West. We just don't have a lot of rules around this, and we're in this privileged position that maybe we can help make some rules, make some standards around this kind of thing. So can we use applied ethics to combat the challenges that are coming? Let's hope so, because now we have a couple of standards that we've developed with our exercise of normative ethics, and we can use them within the field, apply those, and deal with some of the challenges that are coming. So in the rest of this talk, I'm going to give some examples. I have 6 examples of how machine learning is consuming imagery and how some of this is done in an extremely sketchy manner that we need to get our arms around. So the first example is bias in imagery. So the premise I'd like to say is that because bias exists in the training of data image sets, that is creating flawed outcomes, and we need to really work to remove bias out of data sets and out of our work and out of our minds before we even create the project. So I want to show a video that's a poem that I first saw in Boston in our GDG, and it just stopped everyone cold. So I'd love for you to watch this video. It's all about bias in AI and how it's handling certain images. So take a look.
My heart smiles as I bask in their legacies, knowing their lives have altered many destinies. In her eyes, I see my mother's poise. In her face, I glimpse my auntie's grace. In this case of deja vu, a 19th century question comes into view. In a time when Sojourner Truth asked, "Ain't I a woman?" Today we pose this question to new powers, making bets on artificial intelligence, hope towers. The Amazonians peek through windows blocking deep blues as faces increment scars. Old burns, new urns, collecting data chronicling our past, often forgetting to deal with gender, race, and class. Again I ask, ain't I a woman? Face by face, the answers seem uncertain. Young and old, proud icons are dismissed. Can machines ever see my queens as I view them? Can machines ever see our grandmothers as we knew them? Ida B. Wells, data science pioneer, hanging facts, stacking stats on the lynching of humanity, teaching truths hidden in data, each entry and omission, a person worthy of respect. Shirley Chisholm, unbought and unbossed, the first Black congresswoman, but not the first to be misunderstood by machines well-versed in data-driven mistakes. Michelle Obama, unabashed and unafraid to wear her crown of history, yet her crown seems a mystery to systems unsure of her hair. A wig, a bouffant, a toupee, maybe not. Are there no words for our braids and our locks? Does relaxed hair and sunny skin make Oprah the first lady? Even for her face, well known, some algorithms fault her, echoing sentiments that strong women are men. We laugh, celebrating the successes of our sisters with serena smiles. No label, is worthy of our beauty.
So this is kind of tough to look at, and it makes me really unhappy. So how does this kind of thing happen? Let's take a look at how this stuff happens. So one thing we need to understand is that machine learning algorithms, they learn only what they're trained to learn. They learn only from what they're given to look at, like kids. Like if you're raising a child and they're only looking at Tasha Tudor, they get a different aesthetic than if they're watching these crazy videos on YouTube that are geared towards kids and they're created by AIs, which I'm completely against. So it's this concept of garbage in and garbage out, right? If we have incomplete training data, we're going to get incomplete assumptions about that data. So that's good to know, right? And it's also interesting to know that human bias easily translates to machine learning bias. But the problem is that machine learning as a concept, or it's created by an algorithm, or it's created by a computer, it sounds more legit to a lot of people. It sounds more legitimate. It's not. This stuff is created by humans, and we need to make sure that our fingerprints are clean as we create these algorithms. So something to watch for. What's at stake? A lot's at stake. There is a concept of risk assessment. There is a risk assessment algorithm that's being used now in some aspects of law enforcement. And they're asking people who are entering the justice system to fill out a quiz, and they're looking at images and family background, and they're giving them a risk assessment of who's going to be the future criminal, who's going to be going into jail and coming back, recidivism. Predict the future criminal, guess who? It's actually not what the algorithm predicted. So this is a little upsetting as well. And my point is that this is 100% not okay. This is not okay. No. This is basically phrenology. Remember phrenology from about 1840 when it was discredited? It was looking at the shape of people's heads and deciding, what their personality was according to the shape of their heads. I'm probably like a mass murderer according to the shape of my head. It's a weird science, and but this is very pernicious. So not okay. How can we fix it? So one thing is to make sure to remove bias from your data from the beginning. Make sure you have a nice, diverse data set. It doesn't have to be a gigantic data set. There's a concept of, you have to throw a lot of data at these models. You do, but you also need to make sure that it's a nice, diverse set of data so that you can remove bias from the data from the beginning. And also check yourself. What are you trying to prove by the creation of your algorithm? Are you trying to prove something? Maybe you shouldn't be trying to prove anything and just see what happens as you take your diverse data and pass it into the algorithm. Just check the desired outcome and make sure, again, that your fingers are clean. OK, let's lighten up a little bit. Here's a second example of some machine-produced imagery that freaked people out on Twitter recently. So the premise of these images is that most images are scraped from the internet into data sets without any kind of consent, okay? Including the one that was used by the example I'm going to show you. So I would say that their use must be carefully controlled. This is a website called thispersondoesn'texist.com. All of these people are fake. They have just been created by a machine learning algorithm. You can take a look at this website. So there's some celebrities. This guy looks sort of familiar. But all of these people are just created from like a mashup of other people's faces. And they're kind of scary, eerie, realistic looking. It's an interesting thing, and the nice thing is they have this little pop-up window so that you can research on how this stuff was created and where these images are coming from. It's an interesting use case because if you read through the study of how it was done, the algorithm is using 70,000 real people images which are scraped out of Flickr. And they have a little tool that you can check to make sure your photo wasn't, if you don't want it to have been used, you can go in and input your name, your Flickr username, make sure that you're not one of these people that was used to create another fake person. But the burden's on you. You know, I wouldn't have, this is all by chance. I happened upon this, I happened to click the window, and I happened to look through the tool, except I can't remember my Flickr username, so it doesn't do me any good anyway. And I can't remember my Yahoo. It's all gone in the mists of time. Is it better to generate fake people than use stock images? I put the question out to you. Maybe. Is this more real? Is it more diverse than some of these weird stock images that we've been looking at? I don't know. I have a problem with it because we just don't know the eventual use of the data set. We don't know, who's going to take this, what it's going to be used for. Already it was gathered without consent, so I'm going to say no on this one. We're just not going to do this kind of thing. Let's not generate fake people. Okay, example 3. This is quite the video. I'm sure that you as image professionals have been learning about deepfakes. These are video impersonations. There are sites you can go to and input video, and it'll make a mashup with somebody else and produce something pretty realistic looking. My premise on this one is that with this new technology, since videos can be convincingly faked, maybe this should be illegal. Okay, so I've got another triggering video for you. I hope no one's upset by this one.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. That's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia. Thank you. And stay woke, bitches.
It's all fun and games until you lose an election. This is kind of crazy, and I think what happens is that Jordan Peele is doing the voice and has mimicked the way he turns his head and his blinking and his hand gestures, and that's all mimicked by the video, which is created kind of like in real time and then saved. And it's completely wild. You can just do this like right now on the internet. Scarlett Johansson has given up, she said, on trying to sue people or stop people from doing porn with her body in someone else's face. Deepfakes are really great if you're looking to create revenge porn. Not my bag, but if you need it, that's what it's being used for. It's also really could be used for screwing up politics, Brexit, the 2020 election. I think that we need to watch this very, very carefully. It can cause mayhem, I think. It could really cause mayhem. So, because it's just so believable, it's so realistic. That video was a little glitchy, but if you find it on YouTube, it's really smooth and believable. So it's kind of wild to look at that stuff. Is this okay? Of course it's not okay. It's not okay, it's totally unethical. It violates empathy, autonomy, integrity, all those 3 things, right? Okay. There are a couple things that you can do to check the authenticity of videos. You can check, of course, the source. Is it duplicated elsewhere, from some legitimate source, Reuters or something like that? But this is a tech problem, so I think we might need a tech solution to this tech problem. You can check video metadata for authenticity with a service called InVid. There's another one called TruePic. It's a service that you can feed images and video into, and it'll check whether it's been faked. I think that people are looking to create basically a certification service for authenticity. I really would love it if YouTube would do this. I hope that they're on the forefront of making sure that deepfakes are not propagating. Something to really watch as professionals in the field. And of course, educate yourself, now you know. So just watch. This is kind of more light. Example 4, AI-generated art. I'm really interested in how machine learning algorithms can create art, or what people are considering to be art, because it questions the concept of what art is. But for our intents and purposes, you can take a look at how art, considered as real art, is jacking up the art markets. It's really interesting because it's coming on the market and people are looking to evaluate it, figuring out how much it's worth. So something like this, I think it's pretty. It's basically done with style transfer. You take a disco ball and make a style connection with a Klimt painting and get something really cool. But this painting was actually sold for $423,500 at Christie's. It was created by a generative adversarial network. The first piece of AI art that was sold on an auction block in an art market. I think it got that price not because it's good art, but because it's that thing. It's the first piece of art generated by a neural network and posted for sale at Christie's. I think that's what jacked up the price. Personally, I don't find it particularly interesting as a work of art. But who am I to judge? So, but these things are coming on the market. Just to give you an idea of how it was created, it's quite interesting. It was created with 2 neural networks. It's GAN, so it's using a generator that synthesizes new samples of potential art, a piece of art from scratch, and then it uses a discriminator that's taking samples from the training data and the generator's output and predicting if it's a real or fake image. So if it's considered real enough to be good art, it continues down the line and is reprocessed. So you get something that is considered to be more and more real art generated by this neural network. It's quite a nice piece of technology. I just don't know if it's nice art. In my opinion, it's a mashup. So these are some other images. I like Andrew Jackson over there. It's kind of funny. But it's interesting because it's not so easy to create realistic portraits that look original without looking like a total copy. So something to think about. Would you buy such a piece of art? I don't know, I don't want that thing on my wall, but anyway, is it just a mashup? Well, that's one example, but there's something more interesting. It's been created by a creative adversarial network, not a generative adversarial network, a different type of taking images and passing them through an algorithm to create art. And what the people did is that they took like the entire history of art, passed it through a neural network, and the neural network learned that art gets increasingly abstract as you go down the centuries, which is true, right? We have something created in the Middle Ages, and then you get these very beautiful portraits, you get Boucher, you get some very nice things, and then all of a sudden in the 20th century everything gets crazy abstract. The neural network learned that, and then produced, by the end of this whole iteration process, they produced quite a decent set of art. It looks like this, and people actually chose some of these pieces to buy as opposed to other pieces of art created by humans. They actually like this stuff better. Now, I don't know what this says about us or about art in general. I think it's kind of interesting. I wouldn't mind some of this stuff. It's not hideous, and it's not too creepy. I don't know, what do you think, Shirley? But I think that the point I'm trying to prove is that AIs are getting pretty creative, and the people behind them are getting pretty creative and pretty smart about pushing these AIs to get creative. Should we be worried? If I was an artist, yes, I would be worried, especially a modern artist. What about a museum? In Boston, we had a scandal. The MFA, a Museum of Fine Art, was selling off some of its permanent collection to make room for some Jackson Pollock, I believe. And people were just appalled because in Boston we're pretty traditional and we like our Copleys, John Singleton Copleys. So what if museums come under pressure to sell off the old stuff in favor of the new stuff? That's tough to watch. And when does art change from being this kind of mashup to something that's creatively generated? Or maybe we just fall in the camp of Brideshead Revisited and realize that modern art is all great bosh, which is, which is another option, depending on how traditionalist you are. But it's really interesting to watch. And this is the lightest example of all that I have for you, to kind of end on a light note. Example number 5. The field of fashion and photo, is being impacted, and makeup and skincare is being quite impacted by problems with photoshopping, and also those weird makeup apps, which I actually quite enjoy using, Meitu apps. If you haven't tried these, you should kind of try them. Kiss your privacy goodbye, because they take all your data. So, but still, I don't know, I think it's kind of worth it. So these are these beautifying technologies. It takes your images and alters them. And I think they probably ought to be monitored, because if you get a little too deep into this world, it can really mess up your mind. I think people have been discovered to be afraid of going outdoors because they're so worried that they don't look like their avatar in Meitu. So people can get a little obsessed. It's kind of like a plastic surgery obsession. It's the app obsession. It's rare, but it could happen. So I ran a couple of these through. Through some the Meitu makeup apps. So there's Makeup Plus, Meitu, and there's another one, Beauty Cam. Very fun. So I mean, it makes an improvement on me, and I'm all for that, because I need all the help I can get at this age. But I also took a picture in Amsterdam of me and Maya and Doron, and I think it was a wild improvement on all of us, especially Doron. Your head gets all wavy. So yeah, it's just creepy and freaky and a lot of fun to screw around with. Like I said, it's all fun and games until someone develops a complex. In the New York Times, they did a study of these apps, and they said that makeup apps lead us to question our worth and then sell us a filter to fix it. So that's what's going on in the arena of makeup. Now, already in China, there's a backlash, which is kind of interesting. People are getting sick of looking like a plastic doll. And so they have a campaign for real beauty. I really love this image. I think these ladies are absolutely stunning. And it's kind of, we're going back a little bit to something more natural, a more natural aesthetic in China, which is great to see. I just was in CVS in Boston a couple days ago, and I heard on the loudspeaker an announcement of this, so I stuck it in the slides. It's their beauty mark, so you can look at some of their imagery and look for this little white heart image for beauty unaltered, and then they also are marking digitally altered images. So, I mean, this lady, she's gorgeous no matter what you do, so I think it's a really interesting campaign. Maybe they're being influenced by Dove's Real Beauty campaign as well, but I think that this is a trend towards unaltered and unphotoshopped and unretouched images, which is a good thing, I think, for everyone. In France, they've been doing this for a long time, so they have to mark images as retouched. And recently, when I was in France, I was surprised at all the hairs and the moles and the. We're just not used to seeing this. We're so Kardashian in this country. So it's kind of interesting to see what Europe is doing. Okay. In conclusion, you're like, yay, no more weird pictures. Now you have a toolbox, right? As an ethicist, ask the questions using your techniques in meta-ethics. Build some standards for yourself and your companies using normative ethics, and then execute on those standards that you just built using your applied ethics. I think this is something that we can all kind of do. And always remember that the ethical image is both produced and consumed with empathy, autonomy, and integrity. So it's really some key phrases that you can kind of take away and carry with you as you work. So it's really, really fun. And this is my last slide. I just wanted to show me not retouched and just a little retouched. So, you got to try these. Like, that's a Beauty Plus. That's a good one. So lots of fun. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and you can always follow me on Twitter at Jen Looper.